Hi, I'm Scientific Illustrator Stephanie Rozzo. Welcome to Nature Sketch Crate's step-by-step Spinner Dolphin instructional video. In this video I'll be showing you how to paint the Spinner Dolphin by using Nature Sketch Crate's step-by-step painting instructions. You can help this tiny business by clicking that like button, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and shopping for crates at naturesketchcrate.com. First, collect all the materials you need and make sure they're ready to go. Remember, this is just a sketch. Take your time, relax, and don't worry too much if you think you might have made a mistake. Let's get started. Step 1, transfer the image to the watercolor paper. So go ahead and tape the transfer image to the top of the watercolor paper. It doesn't have to be lined up perfectly, just as long as you have it secured to the back of that watercolor paper. And then take your graphite transfer paper, dark side down, light side up, and place it on top of the watercolor paper underneath your transfer image. Then very gently just press that down flat. And then you start anywhere and just draw a little line by just tracing right over one of the lines and then checking to see if that transferred and if it transferred dark enough. So you will want that to be dark enough that you see it at the end when you're done painting these dolphins. So go ahead and go throughout and draw over the lines to transfer them. Don't worry too much about being exact. It's meant to be relaxing and meditative exercise. You can put on some music, a podcast, maybe an audio book, whatever is relaxing to you. Maybe listen to nature outside while you do this, and just trace over all the lines to transfer them. If you find it's hard to keep track of the lines you've transferred with a pencil, you can instead use a colored ballpoint pen or a colored pencil with a sharp tip. That way you know which lines you have already traced over. Once you think you have all the lines transferred, hold down your image in one corner gently and then flip the image up and down like a flip book to see what you might have missed. I always end up missing something, and I see a few lines that I missed. You can transfer them. And I start with my eye on one side and then move to the other as I flip it up and down. And then you can transfer the common name and scientific name if you want. Everything is optional. This is your sketch and your painting, your drawing. Make sure to make it your own. I transfer the common name by drawing the outline and staying in the black area when I do that. Transfer the scientific name and just trace right over it. When you're all done, go ahead and remove the transfer paper. You can use this over and over and over, so you can save that for future use. And then gently remove the tape from the back of the watercolor paper, and then try to remove it if possible from the transfer image. I don't think I'm going to keep this. There's a bit of paper on it and it'll be hard to use again. So I'll compost that, or you can throw it in the trash. Save your transfer image for protecting your watercolor painting while you're painting it from your hand from any smudges if needed. And then lastly, we're going to take this kneaded eraser. If you need to, you can knead it. So just kind of press it into itself over and over and roll it over until you get a nice light gray spot. And you can use that to erase any smudges by just kind of rubbing it over a spot. It's very gentle for the watercolor paper compared to a regular eraser, which will rough the paper up, and then the watercolor won't behave the way it's supposed to on this paper. And if you get a gray spot that's a little dark, make sure you knead it again so you get another light gray spot. You can lighten lines if needed by just kind of dabbing over them, and that'll pick up some of the graphite, so it'll make the lines on your paper lighter. And I like the way this looks. I don't need it to be lighter, and I don't see any smudges that I'm really worried about. Again, this is a sketch, so I'm not going to get too carried away with making it perfect and super clean or anything like that. I love how this turns out with the imperfect mistakes that I do throughout the whole process. And it's important to relax and not take this too seriously. So next, I'm going to add some paint. Step 2, paint in the spinner gray. So we'll mix the spinner gray by getting 4 drops of the 11H carbon black. Make sure when you're using these paints to shake them up. Sometimes the paint pigment does settle on the side and you want the full concentration of the color. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you want 1 drop of the 35H blue aqua. Want to mix that up, release a little bit of water from your water brush by pressing on the barrel and add that and mix it up, or conversely you can add some water from your regular paintbrush from whatever vessel you're holding water in, just kind of dip it in there and get a little bit into your paint palette. I'm going to dab it off on my towel, and then I'm going to go ahead and releasing a little bit more water, add some to the side. I'm going to dab it off again and then do that same thing again. I'm going to test that last color out because we're going to use something that's really wet and light in our palette. So it has a lot of water added in our palette but not added to the paper. So it's going to appear light when we use it. And so I'm going to pick that color up again and add a bunch of water to it again because it's the darker color, C, so it has more pigment, less water added to it in our palette. So made a lighter color by adding more water. It's a little lighter, and dab that off on my towel to get some of that pigment out of my brush, and then do this one more time, adding more water to our palette and that pink pigment, making the concentration of water higher. So it appears lighter. So it appears very light now. So that's the right color to use. We're going to go ahead and take it and apply it to both dolphins, the entire space of both dolphins. And you can start wherever you like. It is darker on the dolphins on the top, so probably best to add it to the top first, and then it will run out of paint pigment as you move that paint down into the dolphin, into the belly, which is lighter. And you don't have to be exact, just kind of fill in the space. And feel free to move the paper around. I try to keep it still for the camera, but feel free to move it around. And if you need to pick up more paint, you can. I'm going to dab it off on my towel because it's a little dark still. Actually, I made it darker because I picked up some paint from that spot. And again, not worry too much about being exact. And I got too much dark color right there, so I'm moving it up into the dolphin. And then dabbing this off again and moving it through. It's a little darker than I expected, but it's going to be imperfectly perfect. Just love the variation that working with watercolor provides. I'm going to picked up a little bit more of that paint again, and I'm going to take it and paint this baby dolphin. Again, starting the top on the dorsal fin and moving down through the dolphin. Any spots you missed, you can go back and just add them in. I'm not going to be worried about lines. I just think that that adds more character to the painting. When you're done, you can let this dry and move on to step 3. Step 3, paint in the spinner gray. So first you want to make sure it's dry. You can just dab your finger over it to see if it's dry. You can feel that. And you don't want to rub your finger over it because if it's still wet, it might smear the watercolor paint, unless that's an effect that you want for your painting. And I'm going to go ahead and add the dry dark spinner gray B, so kind of a medium, something a little darker than the last color we used, to the cape, the top of the beak, the flipper stripe, and this flipper here, like you see in the step 3 image. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up some of that color. Make sure it hasn't evaporated too much water. It's still that medium color. It looks pretty good. And dab it off on my towel. Be careful not to dab it in this black spot again, where we left a lot of paint pigment, so that when I put the paint on my painting, it's not going to be too dark unexpectedly. I'm just going to go ahead and add it to those areas. If you need a finer tip, you can kind of roll your brush on your towel to create a finer tip. And pick up paint whenever you need it and dab it off onto your towel, and then go ahead and apply it to the painting. And I'm doing this a lot like you would with a marker, just kind of filling in the space. Just have to reload your brush with a little bit of paint when it runs low color. And I like to work left to right and top to bottom so that my hand doesn't smudge the paint while I'm painting. And you can also cover up your painting, whatever your hand is resting on, with your transfer image to protect it. When you're done, go ahead and clean off your brush, let this dry, and move on to step 4. Step 4, paint in the spinner gray. So again, I'm going to add this spinner gray A, the wettest, lightest, least concentrated color we have mixed. And I'm going to mix it up a little bit in my palette and then test it out again. Looks very light. Dabbing it off onto my towel, and I moved my towel around so that I don't have that possibility of getting the super dark color again. And I'm going to add that just to this middle flank side section here on both of the dolphins, and then just along the belly as well. I'm going to pick up a little bit more since my brush was sitting there, dab it off on my towel, and then go ahead and add it in to those areas like I see in step 4's image. Oops. Just picked up the wrong color and I realized I was doing that, so I'm gonna pick up the right color, dab it off on my towel after I did clean my brush off. Pick up a little more of that color and add it just to the belly here. It's this bottom part. Clean off my brush, let this dry, and move on to step 5. Step 5, paint in the spinner gray. So I'm going to check this dry by kind of dabbing my finger over it. It feels fine. And then I'm going to take my brush, pick up a little bit of that B dry dark color, and test it out. It looks good still, not too dark. And then I'm going to add it again to the cape, flipper stripe, and flipper, and this dorsal fin, like you see in the step 5's image. We're both dolphins. There's a couple areas I wanted to deepen up a little bit, so just adding a little bit there. And then I'm going to pick up some more, and I'm going to add it to the bottom of the side section here. And then, well, it's still wet, I'm going to clean my brush off on my towel and then just kind of take it along the edge and move it up. I might take this a little bit more, so dab it off on my towel and then apply it to that area again, kind of moving it up. I'm losing a lot of that pigment, so I'll probably have to mix that color again. Adds a little gradient from the bottom to the top there. I'm gonna do the same thing. I have to get a little more paint here actually. Test it out again on my paper. A little more water, maybe a little more pigment. Even when you have simple colors, color mixing can be a little difficult. And then I'm going to do the same thing here with that color. Dab it off on my towel and then just go ahead and let that take a gradient. I always love how every single time I paint, things turn out just a little bit different. I'm going to clean off my brush. I might add just a little bit to this top area, just because dolphin fin is probably a little bit on the darker side, and this has a very light area there. I'm just going to kind of blend that in a little bit, because I'd rather my dolphin has a bit of a darker top part of the tail there. So I'm just evening that out. I don't have to do that at all. I'm going to clean off my brush, let this dry, and move on to step 6. Step 6, paint in the spinner pink and gray. So first you want to mix the spinner pink. Take 1 drop of the quinacridone violet, shake it up. Of course, take 1 drop, put it in your palette, and then add a little water from your brush into the palette, just to mix it up a little bit, get some of that paint on your brush. Dab it off on your towel, and then in a clean spot, add some water to it. We're going to use a really wet, light, low concentrated color. Dab it off onto your towel, and check it out. I'm going to get that a little lighter actually, so I'm going to pull some to the side just add some more water. I can see some of my paint is bleeding, so you could alternatively just pick up a little bit of paint and just start a new spot. Oh, it did it again. Sometimes color mixing can be confusing and hard just because of things like this where your equipment isn't performing the way you expect. But that's also a fun thing about watercolor. I've mixed that color, dab it off, and testing it out. That looks like the right concentration to me. And I'm gonna go ahead and just take that and add it here to the dolphin's bellies. And you can add it to the bottom first. And add it to the flipper a little bit too. And then dab off your brush like we did before, and then just kind of blend it into the belly a little bit. Not being exact at all. I'm going to do the same thing. The baby dolphin, I'm going to add it to the fin and the bottom of the belly, and then I'm going to dab it off onto my towel and blend it in there a little bit. I like that pink color, so you can add more or less or none at all if you want. This is your painting, so make sure to make it your own. I'm going to clean off my brush, and then I'm going to add in the driest, darkest Spinner Gray to, again, the cape area, including the dorsal fin, and the flipper, and the tail flukes, and the flipper stripe, and the top of the beak as well. I'm going to go ahead and pick up some of that paint. It's been sitting here for a while, so some of the water might have evaporated and it's a little darker, so I'm going to let a little bit of water out from my brush into the palette, dab it off on my towel, and then test it out on my test paper here. I think that looks good. I'm going to pick some up. I'm going to go ahead and add it to those areas, being careful not to rub my hand if the pink is still a little wet. I had some inconsistent color here that I didn't really like, so I'm going to go ahead and bring that down into the tail a little bit here. I think I want this flipper to be a little darker this time too, just on the edges. Feel free to make some changes to your painting. You don't have to stay exactly the same as your image. Want it to be unique to you. And where the paint will fall will make it unique as well. So even when I create two images following instructions, I definitely have them come out different because of how I was feeling one day, or how the watercolor was behaving, a variety of different factors. Go ahead and clean off the brush. I think I want to add just a little bit more to the belly area again too. Get quite as dark as I would have liked. So I'm just going to pick some of that up and add it right in there. Not too much, and dab it off because that was a little dark. And then that'll spread a little lighter once I get that pigment off of my brush. Do the same thing with the baby dolphin. Just adding a little bit more contrast to the whole thing. making it more three-dimensional by having some strong darks and lights in there. And I think I like where this is at. So as you can see, it turned out a bit darker than my final reference image, but every time I paint, it's just going to turn out a little different, depending again on my mood or how the paint was acting on that day. So I'm going to let this dry, and I'm going to move on to step 7. Step 7, add ink lines and more paint if needed. So this should dry really fast because I'm not adding a lot of water to the paper itself. And if you're finding it's buckling and taking too long to dry, then you just need to make sure to dab your paintbrush onto your towel more often before you add it to your paper here. And I can test again that this is dry by just dabbing my finger over it. You want it to be dry before you add the pen lines, otherwise they won't go on very smoothly. So I'm going to use the 005 or the 005 black micron, which is the smallest tipped micron, to redraw some of the lines. So I'm going to redraw and redefine the lines in Adult Dolphin, including to thicken the lines of the flippers and some of the lines in the face, including the eye, as you see in 7A in the final reference image here. And I'm also going to use it to redraw and redefine the lines of the baby dolphin, and to thicken some of the lines of the tail, and the blowhole, and the face, and eye, and flippers as needed throughout. And so you can just refer to 7A, your transfer image, and your final reference image for placement. And redefining would be if the paint landed inside or outside of the lines here, you can decide to change that a little bit. So on the dolphin's tail here, the baby dolphin, I can change that a little bit so that all the paint is inside the lines. So redefining that line there doesn't really make a difference for the overall image. And then I can also choose to leave some of this paint on the outside, like on this dorsal fin here on the adult dolphin. I'm gonna go ahead and just draw those lines in and leave that paint on the outside. It's a nice stylistic feel. And if you don't draw the line exactly, that's okay. I'm going to draw some thicker lines throughout that can also change that a little bit, or you can just kind of fill that in. So go ahead and go throughout and draw in those lines. And again, this is meant to be meditative and relaxing, so be sure to put on a podcast or an audiobook, or sit outside and listen to nature, whatever might be relaxing for you. So next I'm going to use the 01 micron, or the 01 micron, to write in a scientific name and re-outline the common name. I am holding this paper still with one hand and keeping my hand steady by keeping my hand on the table on one side. So kind of resting this whole side of my hand here on the palm. And if you need to protect your painting with your transfer image, keep from having smudges, you can do that. Next, I'm going to use the 08 or 08 micron. It's black as well, as the largest tip on it. And this one you want to be careful, because if you run your hand over it before it dries, it will smudge. And it puts down a lot more ink at one time than the other pens. I'm going to fill in that common name. And then I'm going to go throughout and just thicken some of the lines on both dolphins, like I see in my final reference image and my image 7B. And this is your painting, so if there's some areas that you want to add a little bit more to than you see in your image, feel free to do that. You can also make areas smaller by drawing over the paint a little bit, or bigger by drawing outside of the paint lines. And I made a little mistake there. It's perfectly imperfect. I can even that out by thickening this line up a little bit. And you don't even really realize it's there. So just adding some variation from my last image, a little stylistic look. Different every time I paint and every time I draw. Line variation is important. When you do this, make sure you don't make all of the lines thick. The line variation, having some thin and thick lines throughout, some variation, makes it so that it'll pop off the page a little bit more three-dimensional. When you're all done adding the ink, feel free to add more paint if you want to darken some of the different areas a little bit. Or if you want to add a little bit more pink. This is your painting. Make sure to feel free to make it your own. So there's this area on mine. It's a little darker than I expected it to be. And so I might darken this top part of the dolphin up a little bit. So I'll pick up a little more paint. You can paint right over that ink once it dries. I'm gonna add it here to the spot, dab it off onto my towel, test it out on my test paper. Looks pretty good. And I'm just gonna go ahead and add it in again. Again, dabbing it off onto my towel before adding it to my paper. Just getting more contrast from that top to the middle since I added more of the dark color to that middle section, the side section than I expected in the beginning. So that adds more contrast to the whole thing. Defines that top area from the middle area a little more, making it that distinct tricolor. It's a little bit more apparent. You can add more dark color right over that and let it bleed into the areas that are starting to dry. A lot better. I'm going to add a little bit more again to Dolphin. I don't necessarily have to wait for this to dry, I can just add it right in. It's important with watercolor to start light and build up the color to a darker color, because it's very hard to take the color away, but it's easy to continue to add more color to an area. So I like the way this looks now. Feel free to add more paint again if you need to, more ink lines as you need. This again is your sketch and your painting. Make sure to make it your own. We're done. Great job. Thank you for joining me. I hope you had fun and had a chance to relax a little as you created a painting that was new to you. Next, you have a few options of what to do with this painting when you're done. You can punch holes in it and add it to your sketchbook. You can frame it, gift it, and send it in the mail to brighten someone's day. Also, make sure to share it on our Facebook fan art page and use the hashtag #NatureCreateArt to have it featured on our social media. Don't forget to shop for future crates at naturesketchcrate.com and check out the website for regular updates as well. If you have any questions or would like to see a plant or animal featured in a future lesson, please leave it in the comments below.